My heart pounded like a war drum as I stared at the phone screen, its harsh glow illuminating a message that shattered every fragile hope I'd ever nurtured. Give the house to my sister or I'm leaving. I had spent years pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into saving our home, a sanctuary that held memories of laughter, love, and a future we both envisioned. But in that split second, when I refused to hand over what was ours, my husband's face twisted into a mask of fury, and he struck me. The hot sting of his slap burned my cheek as if to erase every promise we'd once made. His eyes flashed with a mixture of entitlement and betrayal, and I knew in that brutal moment that everything was about to change. I remember the early days so vividly, those gentle mornings when we'd wake up in our cozy house nestled on the outskirts of town, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with soft sunlight spilling through the curtains. My husband, David, had always been charismatic, full of grand ideas about family and legacy. Our home was more than bricks and mortar, it was the embodiment of our shared dreams. I had fought tirelessly to rescue the house from foreclosure, scrimping and saving every penny so that it could become our safe haven, a place where we could celebrate life's little victories and weather its storms together. But over time, subtle cracks began to appear in our seemingly perfect union. David's relationship with his sister, Melissa, had always been complicated. While I had never been particularly close to her, I had accepted her presence as part of our extended family. Yet Melissa's life had been a series of missteps, failed relationships, erratic behavior, and a string of financial troubles that had left her perpetually adrift. Despite her struggles, David always defended her, often insisting that she needed our support. I, on the other hand, had always managed to keep my life steady through hard work and careful planning. I had a modest but growing career as a freelance graphic designer, and every extra hour I worked was meant to secure our future, to prove that I was capable and self-reliant. One fateful winter morning, as our family gathered for a casual breakfast in our sunlit kitchen, the tension was palpable. Melissa had just returned from another one of her chaotic nights. She was disheveled, her eyes red, and her voice trembled as she begged for help. David's expression hardened as he listened to her pleas. "You know what, Sarah?" he said sharply, turning to me with an intensity that made my stomach twist. "It's time you give up the house. Melissa needs a safe place to stay, and we can't let you hog it all for your own selfish security." I was taken aback. The house wasn't just a building to me, it was our future, the culmination of sacrifices made over years. I refused, trembling but resolute. "This house is ours. I worked for every penny to secure it, and I won't let it be handed over just to placate Melissa's failures," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. In that charged moment, David's eyes darkened, and before I could react, he struck me, a sharp, stinging blow that sent shockwaves of pain through my entire body. The coffee I had been pouring moments before splashed from his outstretched hand, splattering across my face, the hot liquid mingling with tears. The room fell into stunned silence. Our children, who had been quietly playing in the next room, shrieked in horror, and Melissa froze, her pleading eyes wide with disbelief. I felt as though time itself had stopped. The laughter and warmth of our home had been replaced by cold, unbearable betrayal. I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively reaching to rub the burning marks on my cheek, while David sneered, his voice dripping with a mix of anger and derision. "You're always so stubborn, Sarah. You never think about anyone but yourself," he spat. His words cut deeper than the physical pain. I could barely speak, each breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. In that moment, everything I believed in, our promises, our shared dreams, crumbled into a chaos of hurt and confusion. 4 days afterward, I felt as though I were living in a nightmare. I avoided the mirror, unable to face the reflection of a woman marked by violence and betrayal. My heart was a tangle of emotions, rage, sadness, and a deep sense of isolation. I called my closest friend, Marissa, whose comforting voice over the phone offered little solace compared to the overwhelming silence that now filled my home. "You deserve better, Sarah," she whispered, her words soft and urgent. "No one should ever hurt you like that." Yet even as I listened, I knew that this was not merely a moment of weakness, it was the culmination of years of feeling undermined, of being treated as though my contributions were secondary to David's desire to cater to his sister's whims. In the wake of that violent incident, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I could either allow David's abuse to define the rest of my life or find the strength to reclaim my power. I spent long nights crying, then gradually began to plan for a future where I was in control, a future where my worth was not measured by his cruelty. I visited a local domestic violence center, seeking guidance and counseling. There, I met other women who had faced similar betrayals, and their stories ignited within me a spark of determination. I realized that I did not have to endure this pain in silence. I could fight back, not with vengeance that would only perpetuate the cycle of abuse, but with the steadfast resolve to rebuild my life on my own terms. I decided that I would not let David dictate my future. I contacted an attorney, Ms. Franklin, who specialized in domestic abuse cases. In our first meeting, I recounted every painful detail: the slap, the thrown coffee, the humiliation in front of our children. Miss Franklin's eyes were filled with a determined light as she assured me that I had every right to file for divorce and seek a restraining order. "No one has the right to hurt you physically or emotionally," she said firmly. "We will ensure that you are protected, and we will hold him accountable for his actions." Her words, strong and unyielding, fortified my resolve. I knew then that I was not a victim. I was a survivor, and I would take every necessary step to secure my safety and my dignity. The legal process was grueling. I had to gather medical reports, document every bruise and scar, and endure long court hearings where I recounted the trauma in front of a judge and a roomful of strangers. The courtroom became a battleground where I fought not only for my freedom but for the recognition of my worth. I spoke of the pain of that morning, the searing heat of the coffee, the shock of the slap, the disbelief that someone I loved could be so callous. Every word was a cathartic release, a declaration that I would no longer be silenced by fear or manipulated by guilt. The judge issued a temporary restraining order and granted me the grounds to file for divorce, marking the first tangible step toward reclaiming my life. Outside the legal battles, I began to rebuild my world piece by piece. I moved out of the shared home into a small, secure apartment where I could start anew. I reconnected with friends who had always been my anchor, and I slowly began to rediscover the passions I had set aside while trying to maintain a semblance of a normal marriage. I returned to my work as a freelance graphic designer with renewed vigor, accepting projects that allowed me to express my creativity and assert my independence. Every new design, every satisfied client, was a reminder that I was capable, strong, and worthy of respect, qualities that had been brutally undermined by David's violence. The journey toward healing was neither linear nor easy. There were days when the memory of that violent morning would return with a vengeance, when I would catch a glimpse of David's face in a crowd or hear a familiar tone that sent shivers down my spine. In those moments, I allowed myself to feel the pain, to cry until my body ached, and then I would pick myself up and remind myself of the progress I had made. I attended therapy sessions regularly, and Dr. Simmons, my compassionate counselor, helped me navigate the maze of emotions, from anger and sadness to guilt and self-doubt. "Healing is a process," she would say, "and every step you take is a victory, no matter how small." Her words became a mantra that I repeated to myself in moments of weakness. As the months passed, the legal proceedings slowly began to wind down. David's attempts to downplay his actions in court were met with overwhelming evidence of his abuse. The judge, stern and unsympathetic to his excuses, ruled in my favor, granting me a divorce and ordering that he be barred from any contact with me or our children until further notice. The courtroom verdict was a turning point, a moment of public vindication that helped me reclaim my sense of self-worth. I walked out of that courthouse with a mix of relief and sorrow, knowing that the love we had once shared was irrevocably broken, but also that I was finally free to chart my own course. In the aftermath of the divorce, I devoted myself to rebuilding my life with a focus on healing and self-empowerment. I immersed myself in my work, taking on new and challenging projects that pushed me to expand my creative horizons. I joined local art and design groups, finding a community of like-minded individuals who celebrated creativity and resilience. Slowly, I began to redefine my identity, not as a victim of abuse but as a survivor, a woman who had overcome unimaginable betrayal to emerge stronger than before. I also found solace in writing. I started a blog where I candidly recounted my journey, sharing the raw, unfiltered truth of what it meant to be betrayed by someone you love. The process of writing was liberating. It allowed me to process my emotions, to transform my pain into a narrative of strength, and to connect with others who had faced similar trials. Readers from all walks of life reached out with messages of support, and their stories of resilience inspired me to continue my own journey of self-discovery. At family gatherings, I kept my distance, wary of the toxic dynamics that had once defined our interactions. My children, who had witnessed the incident that fateful morning, gradually began to understand that their safety and well-being were my top priorities. I explained to them, in gentle terms, that sometimes people make choices that hurt others, and that it was important to stand up for yourself and seek help when needed. Though the scars of that violent breakfast remained, I made it my mission to create an environment of love, security and honesty for my children, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once ruled our home. One particularly poignant moment came on the anniversary of that terrible day. I found myself standing in front of a mirror, studying the faint bruise that had faded but whose memory was indelibly etched in my skin. I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection, acknowledging the pain, the fear, and the anger that had once threatened to consume me. And then, with a deep, steadying breath, I made a silent vow. I would never let anyone, no matter how loved they might seem, diminish my worth again. That day, I began a ritual of self-care, dedicating time to exercise, meditation, and creative pursuits that nourished my soul. I learned to celebrate the small victories, a smile from a friend, a compliment from a colleague, the simple pleasure of a warm cup of tea on a chilly morning. Each moment became a step toward reclaiming the self I had nearly lost. As time went on, I saw changes not just in my own life but in the community around me. The local domestic violence support group that I had joined grew into a network of survivors who met regularly to share their experiences and support one another. In those meetings, I found strength in solidarity, a reminder that while my story was uniquely painful, it was also part of a larger tapestry of resilience. We encouraged each other, celebrated each other's progress, and held space for the raw, unfiltered truths of our lives. It was in those shared moments of vulnerability that I realized I was not defined by my past, but by the courage to move forward. Meanwhile, David's life took a downward spiral. The legal and financial repercussions of his actions began to surface. Court cases, fines, and the loss of credibility in his professional circles. Rumors spread that he had struggled to find employment afterward, that his behavior had alienated friends and colleagues alike. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he had become increasingly isolated, his once confident demeanor replaced by a haunted, bitter air. While part of me felt a pang of sorrow at the thought of someone I had once loved suffering, I also knew that his choices had consequences. I no longer harbored any delusions of reconciliation. I had chosen a path of healing and self-empowerment, one that did not leave room for his toxicity. Looking back now, as I sit in the quiet sanctuary of my new home, a modest apartment filled with warmth and light, I can hardly believe how far I have come. The memory of that violent morning, the shock of the slap, and the cold, mocking laughter that followed, still lingers, but it no longer defines me. Instead, it serves as a reminder of the strength I discovered in the darkest of times. I have learned that the journey to healing is not about erasing the past but about transforming it into a foundation upon which to build a brighter future. Every day I make a conscious choice to honor my own worth. I pursue opportunities that challenge me, surround myself with people who uplift and support me, and remain steadfast in my commitment to self-care and growth. I continue to write about my experiences, sharing my story in the hope that it might inspire others who face similar betrayals. Through it all, I have come to understand that true empowerment comes not from seeking revenge, but from reclaiming your life, piece by piece, with dignity and resilience. This is my story, a tale of heartbreak and betrayal, of violence and ultimately redemption. My husband's slap on that fateful breakfast, when I refused to give my house to his sister who had just spiraled out of control, was a turning point. It was a moment of profound pain that forced me to confront the reality of my marriage and the cost of compromising my own self-worth. But in the aftermath of that violence, I found a strength I never knew existed. I fought back, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, determined resolve to rebuild my life on my own terms. I have reclaimed my dignity, restored my financial independence, and most importantly, discovered that my true worth is not measured by the actions of those who choose to hurt me, but by the strength with which I rise after every fall. Today I stand as a survivor, a woman who has turned the darkest moments of her life into the catalyst for personal growth and transformation. I have built a future that is wholly my own, defined by resilience, creativity, and an unwavering commitment to living authentically. The scars of that morning remain, etched into my memory as reminders of what I endured and overcame. And every day as I look toward the horizon with a heart that is healing and a spirit that is unbreakable, I know that I have triumphed over the betrayal that once threatened to consume me. I have made him regret his actions in the most profound way possible, by reclaiming my future, one brave step at a time.